The Steam Deck was one of the most exciting hardware announcements in years, and it could be one of the most exciting launches too. But the more I look into it, the more convinced I am that it's going to be a hard sell to casual gamers. I'm really looking forward to the device, but with all the will in the world, it's not going to be pick up and play in many games, certainly not at launch at least. Then there's Proton. Valve has said they are working with anti-cheat companies to get online games working with Proton ahead of launch. It was even reported last year that Valve and Easy Anti-Cheat were working together to solve the problem with Proton and EAC, but it's not been solved yet. But even without anti-cheat, many games either aren't running or have to be tweaked in order to run. Steam has around 50,000 games on its service, and yet only roughly 15,500 work with Proton and or natively under Linux. That means that only about 30% of games on Steam currently run under Linux and or SteamOS. How on earth are Valve going to get from that to 100% by launch? How are they even going to get to something like 80% by launch? Now, I could be completely wrong, but it looks like an impossible task. And even if they're pretty far along with getting a large number of games to work, I still can't see it being 100% by launch. For a start, how are they going to test something like 50,000 games from start to finish to see if they run fine throughout? Because we all know that games can run fine at the start and then crap out a little way in, or die near the end. Just think of the number of people Valve would have to employ to engage in that kind of testing operation. It's just not logistically possible. So they are simply not going to be able to test every single game with SteamOS and Proton. That's just the way it is. And what that means is that those early adopters who buy a Steam Deck are going to end up being beta testers in many respects. Personally, I don't mind that. I belong to the Xbox Insider program and I've been trying to get onto the Sony PlayStation 5 beta. And I enjoy getting updates early as well as sending feedback when I find an issue. But how many casual gamers have that mindset? Yeah, look. Plenty of computer enthusiasts are going to be like me and will even enjoy tweaking and frigging about to get things running. But as I've said repeatedly, that's not the audience that Valve need to make this a success. What they need is to get people who aren't paid up members of the PC Master Race on board. People who didn't buy the Steam controller and who don't enjoy spending more time getting stuff working than actually playing the games. I honestly think too many people have got their rose-tinted blinkers on where the Steam Deck is concerned. It's going to be one hell of a product in many ways, and I'm bloody excited for it, but some people have apparently thrown logic out of the window because their excitement has got the better of them. Trouble is, if the Steam Deck launches and people do start finding their favourite games don't work, then there's going to be some very angry fanboys out there. You know, the same people who are currently angry with me for stating the blindingly obvious that not all Steam games are going to run on the Steam Deck, either because of the controls or because of Proton and SteamOS. Because the Steam Deck is not going to play every game on Steam. Certainly not at launch, as I've said, and not unless Valve can work a miracle between now and launch. But again, that's fine. I never expected it to. Only the fanboys buying into all the marketing guff and the vague murmurings from Valve in relation to Windows on the device or services like Game Pass running expected that. And that's just not realistic. Those of us who are more realistic, though, can still be excited for the device. And I certainly am. It's still groundbreaking and it's still spectacularly good value for money. And it's also only the start of something. If Valve are true to their word, then we could see upgrades to this device over time and even other manufacturers jumping on board and offering higher-end models, or even lower-end models perhaps. And while I do still have my doubts about the number of games that will work at launch, or the number of games that will work with the controller, because I still do have my doubts about that as well, I do think a successful Steam Deck will only lead to more games on the device as Steam and developers continue to work to increase the viable library using Proton and other tools. So no, not all games are going to run on the Steam Deck at launch, or even 6 months or a year down the line. But that's perfectly fine. Even with the 30% or so of games that currently run under Steam OS and Linux, that's still a massive number of games. And as long as it's clear which games do and don't run, especially if you're trying to purchase them for the Steam Deck, because I think that's really important. You buy it for the Steam Deck and it doesn't work, you're going to be really pissed off. I think those of us who are looking forward to the device will still be relatively happy. And let's face it, the library will grow over time as more and more of these games are made compatible. And let's just turn it round for a moment as well. How many consoles launch with a library of games that run into the thousands? Yeah, none. The Steam Deck is the first. So even if it won't run the entire library at launch, that's okay. Hell, it's better than okay, it's bloody amazing. We're going to have thousands of games day one. We simply can't get away from the fact that the Steam Deck won't run every game at launch, and some that will run won't run well because of controller issues or just because some games don't play well with Proton. That's not a controversial statement if you think about it. But what we should be focusing on is the fact that it will still have a massive library at launch, and that library will only grow over time, especially if Steam Deck is successful. We've been looking at it the wrong way round. Not all games will run, but it still has a much bigger library than virtually every other console out there. And Valve are betting on Linux, and I think that means they will put time and resources into making the Steam Deck successful. At least I hope so. And as I said at the beginning, I do have my doubts about the Steam Deck's mainstream appeal, but I think that could improve over time as well, as Valve refine the software and hardware to make it easier to use for more casual gamers. They just have to be committed to the product over the long term, and if they are, they could have something very special on their hands. Not to mention, this device could free them from the shackles of Windows OS, something they've been trying to achieve for a long time now. Of course, that also raises questions about whether Windows really will run, or run well at least, on the Steam Deck, or whether we will see Game Pass on the Steam Deck. But those questions are for another video. As it stands, the Steam Deck looks like a niche product, but one with potential to become a crossover hit if Valve do manage to make a truly pick-up-and-play device. Because if they do, then word of mouth will spread and people will start to take notice. And then you'll get more casual gamers looking at the device and starting to think, oh, that looks cool. They'll go to their tech friend who's got one and they'll pick it up and they'll play it and they'll find it's relatively easy to use, and then they'll be sold. At this stage, though, that's a big if, and there are still a ton of questions to be answered, such as, will there be Windows drivers for the machine? Just how many games will run on the Steam Deck at launch, either natively or through Proton? Will the store clearly label games that won't run on the Steam Deck, and so on? These are all relevant questions, and asking them shouldn't get people's panties in a pickle. We should all want to know answers to these questions. And whether we get them now or later down the line when the Steam Deck is released, I'm still excited for it. And I've still got my pre-order in. So yeah, at the risk of repeating myself again, I do think the Steam Deck is a great piece of kit. I do think it's going to be successful, certainly within the PC crowd and certain other console gamers who are interested. But the jury's still out as to whether it'll be a crossover product, and I do have my doubts there. And, I think it's only fair to have doubts about that, given that it is an unproven product as yet. But as ever, you may disagree with me, and if you do, let me know in the comments and detail where you think I'm wrong. And if you agree with me, come into the comments as well, and we can all have a discussion. After all, these videos are supposed to be jumping off points for just that, for discussion. Otherwise, it'd be just me sitting in a room talking to myself. But anyway, I'm done. I'm going to go and grab myself a cup of tea, and I will speak to you guys in the next one. Bye.